The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
And we're off. The most overhyped week in sports. The week leading up to the Super Bowl. I did Radio Row probably 15, 16 times over the years. I know the routine. It all gets started today, and I enjoyed it. Do I have a great desire to go back? Not unless the Commanders are in. But having done this a whole bunch of times, I can tell you a little bit about what this week is about. We will get to that. Andy Reid spoke last week to Rich Eisen about getting his team ready to prepare for a third straight Super Bowl championship, which no team has ever done. We'll get to that. And Fay Vincent has passed away at the age of 86. The really short-time commissioner of baseball, but wow, when you look back at the 3-year run that he had, what he had to deal with was really incredible. I really hadn't realized this. I had experienced it at the time. I was actually in New York covering a lot of baseball for Sports News Network, which lasted a year, but launched a number of careers like Kurt Menefee and others. And anyway, the stuff that he dealt with, the Pete Rose banishment, the earthquake in San Francisco at the World Series, banning George Steinbrenner, the lockout in 1990. It was a tumultuous 3-year period. And after 3 years, the other owners said, he's got to go. The charge was led by Bud Selig, who became the interim commissioner, then the longtime commissioner. And kind of a footnote in history is Fay Vincent. And I will have some stories, personal stories, about his time as commissioner of baseball. This trade that supposedly shook the world over the weekend, I'm going to have a little perspective on that as well coming up. But might as well start with the Super Bowl. And they've changed things a bit, the way they do it. When I first started covering them, and the first one I ever went to was Super Bowl 20, which was in New Orleans, and remains, I think, the craziest Super Bowl week ever. Maybe there have been some crazy things happening for sure. Like a player who got arrested on the morning of the game for soliciting a prostitute. Those kind of things have happened. And Stanley Wilson, who was a running back for the Cincinnati Bengals, got arrested on drug charges the night before the Super Bowl in Miami, and I think is still in prison after all these years, like 36 years. But what they do to build up the game, and it's brilliant on the part of the league. It started with Pete Rozelle, who had been the public relations director for the Rams. He understood marketing. He understood how to hype things up. And the NFL is a juggernaut now. You're going to have over 100 million people in the United States watching this game on Sunday. And one of the things that used to kick off Super Bowl week, and it was on a Tuesday, now it's on a Monday, but they called it Media Day. Now, every day is Media Day at the Super Bowl. But back in the day, on Tuesday, because it used to be that teams would come in Monday. Now they come in Sunday, so they both got in last night, the Chiefs and the Eagles. And they would have an opportunity for the players to be spread out all over the field in their uniforms. And they also, at one time, called it Picture Day because there would be a team photo taken of the Super Bowl team. Well, as the years went by and Media Day became a bigger, I don't want to say a bigger deal, but more of a circus, with various people showing up in costumes and asking stupid questions, and the downtown Julie Brown period where she was a big deal, and players would do goofy things. I went to so many of these, and usually what I did was I sought out somebody who had a connection to Washington, either had played here or, I remember interviewing Perry Brooks' son when he was with the 49ers, those kind of things. Had to have some kind of a D.C. connection. And I wouldn't usually go to these big media scrums. They got to the point where they started putting these players in booths. Now I guess they all have booths. And now they call it Monday Media Night. So this is going to be at the Superdome tonight. And somewhere along the line, maybe 20 years ago, they thought it would be a good idea for the fans to watch this. Now, I can't think of anything more boring than watching media people talk to players about the same old ridiculous questions that get asked every year. But this is supposed to draw 30,000 people tonight. 30,000 people who, I don't know whether they had to pay money or had to qualify for tickets or however it worked, but they are going to be there watching people talk to players. And again, this is all part of the hype that goes along with Super Bowl week. So there's that. There's also, and everybody's doing this, lists, and they'll get even bigger next year. Well, of course they'll get bigger, but they'll be a bigger deal when it's 60. This is Super Bowl 59. So USA Today put out a list of the top 59 players in Super Bowl history. Since this is Super Bowl 59, the top players who played in the game. It was done by Nate Davis, who really didn't have any criteria, as he explains in his little intro there. He says, I'm trying to spread it around to other positions because otherwise you just really have quarterbacks and wide receivers and maybe some running backs thrown in. So he mixed it up a lot, and his top 5 would probably not surprise anybody. He's got, Tom Brady number 1 since he won 5 of them. Or sorry, won 7 of them. Joe Montana went 4 for 4. Jerry Rice, who won, he won 4 or not? I think he probably did. Yeah, because he won 3 with Montana, and then he won another one with Steve Young. So yeah, that'd be 4 for Rice. Terry Bradshaw, who went 4 for 4. And Charles Haley, who I think is still the only one to win 5. Won 3 with the Cowboys and 2 with the 49ers, if I'm not mistaken. But after that, again, Brady 1, Montana 2, Rice 3, Bradshaw 4, Haley 5. Doug Williams is number 6 all time. And if you're basing it on how he performed in the Super Bowl, I don't think he can do any better than that. 4 touchdown passes in 1 quarter. Not to mention the historical significance, the cultural significance, everything else that went into it as the first African-American quarterback to start a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl. So having a number 6, not a surprise. Here's what, and this always gets me angry when I think of Joe Jacoby and how he's getting shafted for the Hall of Fame. The only other Redskin on this list, and there are 59 players on this list, the only other one is Joe Jacoby. John Riggin, Super Bowl MVP, not on it. Mark Rippon, Super Bowl MVP, not on it. Joe Jacoby is on this list and should be on this list. He's at number 47 because he was helping to block for 2 of the greatest rushing performances in the history of the Super Bowl, including the top one, which was Timmy Smith, who ran for 204 yards in that Doug Williams game. I mean, that's just a remarkable offensive showing where you throw 4 touchdown passes in 1 quarter, and there's an argument over who could be the MVP with Timmy Smith running for 204 yards. John Riggin set the record at 166, which was broken a year later by Marcus Allen. But because Jake was blocking on all 3, he's among the top 59 players. And there's no mention of any of the other Super Bowl participants for Washington, including others who played on the offensive line with him. And it makes perfect sense that Russ Grimm, who was a backup in that last Super Bowl for the Redskins, is not on it. He's in the Hall of Fame, and Joe Jacoby is on the list and not in the Hall of Fame. So. Just really ridiculous stuff. All right, this excitement over the trade over the weekend. A lot of people woke up Sunday morning and said, what? That's what happened? I guess it's a really big deal in Los Angeles. I'm sure it's a really big deal in Dallas. But it rarely happens that a superstar is traded for a superstar. There's a long-told story about the owner of the Red Sox and the owner of the Yankees back in the 1950s, maybe even the 1940s, discussing a trade of Joe DiMaggio for Ted Williams, which never happened. But maybe that would come close to this if it ever did, but it didn't. So anyway, the trade of Luka Doncic, who's 25, for Anthony Davis, who's 31, shook up a lot of people. Like, oh, how could this happen? Nico Harrison is the general manager of the Mavericks. He used the word culture. Culture has now become the most overused word in sports. But it also is very descriptive of how things can change, and I think we could all agree that Dan Quinn did change the culture here, and the culture that he operates the franchise under right now is a hell of a lot different than it was under Ron Rivera. Quinn has a lot of advantages, including a franchise quarterback, including actual real human beings owning the team, things like that. But as Nico Harrison was describing what happened, and apparently he did not tell Jason Kidd, the coach. He told him after the fact. And he said to the media yesterday, as we turn the page, I think it's important to know that Jason and I had a vision and a culture that we want to create since we've been here. The players that we're bringing in, we believe, exemplify that. We think defense wins championships, and we're bringing in one of the best two-way players in the league, in Anthony Davis. Here's more from Harrison yesterday.
Well, I think the long term is the time frame. I think he fits our time frame. If you pair him with Kyrie and the rest of the guys, he fits right along with our time frame to win now and win in the future. And the future to me is 3-4 years from now. The future 10 years from now, I don't know. I don't think they probably bury me and Jay by then, or we bury ourselves.
Well, coaches and general managers get fired all the time. Here's the real reason. You don't trade a 25-year-old superstar who's the face of the franchise for a 31-year-old player who will be on his third team. And also, Luka's hurt a lot. He has not played since Christmas. He's overweight. And even Magic Johnson took a little jab when he tweeted about it. I guess he's no longer involved in ownership in the team. Or maybe he is. I don't know. Maybe he's able to buy back in. But he said that he felt that LeBron James was going to help Luka with a championship mindset, which would include getting in better shape. And apparently that and maybe some other things that we don't necessarily know about made this trade happen. And this was Brian Windhorst, who covers the NBA, yesterday on ESPN.
I know that there's a temptation to focus on the Lakers here because they potentially just acquired the next great Laker, and it's an amazing story when you look at the history of their franchise. But the story of the moment and what my phone is filling up with is the reaction to the Dallas Mavericks making this move. I had an all-star, current NBA all-star text me and say, do you know how much the Mavericks must hate Luka? I mean, this is what they're talking about in the league. I've had, veteran coaches text me and say they can't believe they saw this. They just have never seen anything like this. And Luka is 25 years old, okay? He is under contract for several more years, and this summer he is already eligible for a Supermax. I find it completely unbelievable that he would not sign that contract. This was not done because the Mavericks didn't think Luka wanted to be there. Even if he didn't sign that contract, you would have a whole year to figure it out. This was done because the Mavericks didn't think that going forward with Luka was best for their franchise. Think about that statement. A 25-year-old who's been first-team All-NBA the last 5 years and carried them to the finals a few months ago. And they said, we want out of the Luka Doncic business, and we want out of it now. They didn't put him on auction, Kevin. They didn't say, we're going to trade Luka Doncic, bring us your offers. They targeted one team, and they made the offer and deal in stealth mode. This is just shocking. And I will say this. We all know what Luka's, pockmarks are. We all know what his deficiencies are. We all have seen his greatness. But nobody in the world has more information on Luka Doncic than the Mavericks. And the Mavericks just pulled the ripcord. It's a stunning situation.
Yes, it's stunning, more so because it's two stars traded for one another. We have seen stars traded before, and I'm going to go through the details on this. Wilt Chamberlain, who some could argue is the best player to have ever played the game, most dominant, 100 points, average 50 points a game in a season. He was traded in his prime at age 28 from the Golden State, or I guess they were then the San Francisco Warriors, back to Philadelphia, where he had started with the Philadelphia Warriors, who moved out west. They were replaced by the Syracuse Nationals, who moved from Syracuse to Philadelphia and became the 76ers. He went there, and then at 31, just a year after leading his team to the championship, Wilt was dealt again to the Lakers. And the Lakers, as you'll see, get involved in these kind of deals all the time. Oscar Robertson, one of the best players to ever play the game, traded to the Bucks with some tread left on the tires. Charles Barkley was traded in 1992 from Philadelphia, also probably because they were fed up with him. He went to Phoenix for a bag of donuts and got them to the finals. They couldn't get past Michael Jordan and the Bulls. Shaquille O'Neal, traded from Los Angeles after Kobe said, get him out of here. Kevin Durant traded to Phoenix. These things happen. These trades do happen from time to time, but the overriding theme is that you don't have superstar traded for superstar, and I think that's what makes this stand out. It's not like, Luka was traded. We traded Anthony Davis? No, it wasn't that. It was that they were traded for one another. That's what happened. Now, this is possibly going to cost Luka some money, and the money is just outrageous, and I understand it from Dallas' standpoint. You got a guy who's been around for 7 years. True, he's only 25, but he's overweight, isn't putting in the effort to get himself in shape, is hurt a lot now, and we're looking at paying him to keep him, which is, get your head around this, 5 years, $345 million. Guaranteed, all of it. I mean, whether he plays or he doesn't play, unless he retires, which he's not going to do. So when going to the Lakers can only give him, because of the trade, and I don't know all the machinations of this, but because of the trade, they can only offer $229 million over 5 years, but he can opt out after next season. Not this season, but next season. And I guess they could agree to pay him the Supermax. There's also reportedly interest from the Miami Heat, who would like to have him. And from a tax standpoint, if that means anything to him, it's a lot better to be in Florida than it is to be in Los Angeles. But, man, this is – I think it makes total sense from Dallas' standpoint. They're looking at a guy who won't get himself in shape, and as he gets older is going to get hurt even more. Everybody knows that. And they don't want to pay that kind of money for a guy who – may or may not be on the court. Understand that. And they also made a point in saying that they got a two-way player in Anthony Davis. Luka doesn't play any defense. He didn't even sometimes go down the court because he drives to the basket, and if he misses, he whines to the ref that he got hit, and the refs are at the other end of the court, and, they give up a basket, and maybe he'll get the ball back and do it again. He's a great scorer. He's a great, great scorer, and he's a great talent. But from their standpoint, from the Mavericks standpoint, they're looking at a payout of close to $70 million a year, and they're saying, for what? What are we going to do that for? For a guy who may or may not play? If we were guaranteed we'd win a championship, maybe we'd do it. But they came up short against Boston last year. Boston looks even better. And Dallas is probably getting worse with a player who isn't putting in the effort to get himself in shape. And again, when you hear people say they know more than we do, means that they looked at this and said, yeah, it's a generational talent, but we're fed up. We can't do it anymore, which is what happened not the second time with Wilt, but the first time. The Warriors looked at Wilt, and they said, yeah. And as a matter of fact, even though they didn't get much in return, and I'll detail this trade coming up, when Wilt led the 76ers to the championship in the 1966-67 season, they played the Warriors. They had added Rick Barry at that point. But had he stayed with the Warriors, they might have continued to win championships, but they had enough. They traded him away. And Philadelphia 66-67, I know it's before SportsCenter, but that's regarded as one of the greatest teams of all time. Andy Reid in New Orleans for the Super Bowl before he left. A little chat with Rich Eisen. We'll play some of that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
There was this big uproar last week when Bill Belichick, I think flippantly, said that they should rename the Lombardi Trophy the Brady Trophy. I don't think he was 100% serious with that. And if he was, it's a joke. That's not going to happen. But Tom Brady has done something with Super Bowls, which is incredible. Though if Patrick Mahomes wins his third straight and his fourth overall before the age of 30, which could happen on Sunday, then we take a whole new look at this. But the numbers that are in this little tweet from Fox Sports today are just mind-blowing. Tom Brady, if you took 3 segments of his career, he would be a Hall of Famer for all 3 of them. Like, theoretically, he could be a 3-time Hall of Famer. Here are the numbers. From the ages of 23 to 29. I think 23 he was a rookie and barely played behind Bledsoe. So he really didn't start to play till he was 24. But still, In that period of time, ages 23 to 29, he threw 147 touchdown passes, 21,000 yards, and won 3 Super Bowls. If he stops there, if he says, I'm only going to play until I'm 30 and leaves, he's a Hall of Famer. If you erase that period of time, if you erase the numbers from the ages of 23 to 29, and you just look at his career from age 30 to 39, 40,000 yards passing, 309 touchdowns, 2 Super Bowl wins. You know, I think Jim Plunkett's finally in. So I think all the quarterbacks who have 2 are in. So you just take that segment. But no, let's just take the ages of 40 to 45. Let's throw out those first 2 periods, 23 to 29 and 30 to 39. After the age of 40, he threw 193 touchdown passes, won 2 Super Bowls, and threw for 27,000 yards. I mean, you could make a case for that as a Hall of Famer, just for that 6-year period after the age of 40. It's incredibly mind-blowing. I don't know if you can say that. Incredibly mind-blowing? Yeah, it's just mind-blowing. Anyway, 2 of those Super Bowls, the 2 that he got after the age of 40, kind of came at the expense. Actually, 3 of them, if you count the one where Andy Reid was coaching the Eagles. So 3 of those Super Bowls were beating Andy Reid's teams in Jacksonville in 2003 or 2004 for the 2003 season for the back-to-back. And then the last one that he won in New England, they beat a young Patrick Mahomes on their field in Kansas City. And then the last one when he was in Tampa, and that was the one that Patrick Mahomes lost. So Andy Reid has seen Brady, seen more than enough of him, probably glad he's retired, but Andy Reid is still going, and he's in New Orleans for the Super Bowl attempting to do what no other coach has been able to do, win 3 straight Super Bowls. Should be pointed out that Vince Lombardi won 3 championships. It's just the first one did not have a Super Bowl attached to it because it had not yet been invented. But Reid talked to Rich Eisen last week, and among the topics was his tight end, Travis Kelce, who he took in the second round. And obviously that was one of the great picks that he had as head coach of the Chiefs. And he talked to Eisen about how the decision was made to draft him.
Well, I had known him for a while because of his brother playing for me. And then my kids were at Temple, one playing, one coaching, while he was playing at Cincinnati. So I had a chance to meet him, see him, that whole deal before I even got here. And then when we got here, John Dorsey wanted a tight end and had looked at him and liked him. And so that was an easy thing for him to take. And it's worked out. Now, when he was young, different than his brother was more calm, still very intense, but more calm than Travis. So when we got Travis, he was a little bit live wire, but has matured over the years. He's done great. And he loved Alex Smith and he loved Pat Mahomes too. They're buddies. And he's been fortunate to have these 2 great quarterbacks that have been throwing to him. But he's got a big heart. He always had that heart. That's why he's broken up about Alex. He loved Alex, and he's emotional. You know, Trav's emotional. He's not afraid to show it, and that's part of him that we love.
Well, and you know, there's lots to love about Alex, and obviously you won a lot with Alex, but you know, Mahomes was drafted where he was drafted, and I'm just wondering now that you're seeing Mahomes be on a Mount Rushmore path here, and did you looking back, do you think he would have been on that path if you were forced to have to go to him right away, like so many teams in the NFL these days?
Yeah, listen, I don't know that. I mean, I'd hate to doubt him on that because he probably would have proved me wrong. But we had Alex here, and that I thought Alex could help him in certain ways and still have a great year, which he did. But just to watch Alex work, I think is invaluable for in this case for Pat, not only to work on the field, but in the classroom, off of the field during the off season, how you handle the OTAs, all those things that he got to see Pat could go, all right, this is the way you do it in the National Football League, and still be a Pro Bowl player. And Pat was able to just bank all that away. That part he might not have seen had he started, as a starter. So, but I wouldn't tell you he's great because he sat out the first year and was a backup. I wouldn't tell you that. I mean, I think he would have been still a pretty good player now.
Well, I mean, no doubt. And the reason why I'm kind of hitting the Wayback Machine here is to set up the magnitude. It's not just any Super Bowl. This is a three-peat, Coach. And I understand that you keep things compartmentalized. That's part of your greatness as well. But do you mention this at all? Do you have any plans to mention at all that this is an opportunity that no one else has ever had in the history of the Super Bowl? No one else has ever had the opportunity that you and the rest of this team have against the Eagles in 2 Sundays. Do you mention it this week?
So I haven't heard one mention of it. I haven't mentioned it. I don't plan on mentioning it. But I'm also not naive enough to know that they haven't heard it. I mean, I've heard it a ton up to this point, and I'm sure I'll hear it more this next week once we get down to New Orleans. So we all know that's out there, but really what matters is how you take care of business. That's not going to help you at all. That part's not going to help you. What's going to help you is that you focus in and take care of business today while we're doing our practices or the meetings we have today. I mean, take care of that. And everything else, you let the chips fall where they may. You got 2 great teams playing each other. So it's hard to predict one way or the other. You can, though, control how you prepare yourself. So that's what we've been doing. We've been doing that all season. And I'm sure the guys have been asked that question a bunch, but I never hear them mention it. They just have stayed focused.
To what do you owe the 17-game win streak in 1-possession games? How do you do this? Do you coach it? Do you drill down so significantly? I'll give you the floor on that, Andy.
Yeah, well, we know going in that there's so much parity in this league, so any game can go either way. I mean, we get it. There's just too many great players and great coaches in this thing, and in the way the cap's set up and the draft is set up, Roger Goodell has given every city an opportunity to potentially win. So you already know that part. But to say that I knew about 17 games, 1-score games coming down and us being on the winning side of it, no, I mean, that's hard to practice other than going back to what I said, do the best you can with what you've got there and try to put your guys in the best position you possibly can. So, and then you've got to have a little luck, man. That ball's not round. And so it doesn't always go where you want it to go. It can bonk off a goalpost and either come back to you or go through. And we've had one of those go through. And, we've had some turnovers. We've had blocked field goals, extra points. We've had all those things. So we've kind of hit the gamut of ways to come out on the positive end. But very easily, those could have gone the other way.
Well, in the couple minutes I have left with you, Coach, I'm gonna dare to jump in here and ask you to be a little reflexive about yourself and your career and where you are right now. I do frequently ask people who are at such a high level and have an opportunity to do something so significant, usually ask them, what if I had told you back at a certain point of your career that you would be in a position right now? Like, for instance, when you take the field for Super Bowl 59, you will be coaching in your 45th playoff game. That's the most ever. You will now have as many Super Bowl appearances as Don Shula, one more than Tom Landry. You're already ahead of them in terms of most playoff wins as a coach. And I could say, what if I had told you when you showed up on NFL Total Access in Jacksonville? But I'm going to go here. What if I told this Andrew Reid back in the day for the punt, pass, and kick that you would be the coach to go for a three-peat and have as many wins as you have? What if I told that kid before that competition?
I wouldn't have believed it. I mean, this is a dream job. You're one out of 32 guys in the whole world, Rich. And so, I mean, to think that you're going to be one of those is crazy. So I respect the heck out of every day I get to do it. And then all those guys you named, all those great coaches, I respect the dog out of them too, because I try to stay up on the history of the game. I always have. And those names are, those are great coaches. I've had a chance to meet a couple of them, and before they passed on.
Yeah, the picture that Rich is referring to there, you've seen it. It's Andy Reid as a 13-year-old where he's huge, and there's a little kid standing next to him. Now, I didn't realize this. Punt, pass, and kick has a wide range of ages. It's like 8 to 13. So Andy Reid was at the top at 13. He said he didn't win, and the kid standing next to him was only 8. So it wasn't like two 13-year-olds standing next to each other. But that's a famous picture. Andy Reid in the punt, pass, and kick competition wearing a Rams uniform. And part of the story, too, is they didn't have a jersey in the kids' outfits big enough to fit him, so they had to go into the Rams locker room and get a jersey for him. He's wearing number 34. And if you look closely, the other uniforms don't have the number on the sleeves. And this was an actual game uniform that Andy Reid wore at the age of 13. He didn't play in the NFL, but he was an offensive lineman at BYU. And I think he was a blocker for Jim McMahon, if I'm not mistaken. Reid's my age. He would have graduated in 1980. Went right into coaching. But he was actually a player in college football and then transitioned to become one of the great coaches of all time. And it's funny if you look at the length and breadth of his career. When he was in Philadelphia, he was always the bridesmaid. He did get to one Super Bowl, and they lost to Tom Brady and the Patriots, but they had a number of years where they had the best team in the NFC, and they would lose the NFC Championship game sometimes at home. And Reid was the guy who many thought, well, he's good enough to get you there, but not good enough to take you over the hump. And now he's attempting to make history by winning 3 in a row. And this would be 5, right? No, it's his 5th Super Bowl appearance. So this would be 4 if he wins, right? Yeah, 4 if he wins. So, he's certainly turned around that narrative. And I'm sure if he wasn't winning like this, he would be out of football. But at 66, why does he quit? And also what he said about Patrick Mahomes and the development that he had under Alex Smith, that's been a familiar narrative. Like, it was really helpful for Patrick Mahomes that he had Alex Smith to mentor him and that he got to sit for a full year and watch. Well, with what we've seen with Jaden Daniels, if the circumstances were similar in Kansas City, that there was somebody like a Marcus Mariota who came in knowing that he likely wasn't going to win the starting job if Daniels was any good, and then you had Alex Smith, who had already, shown that he could be that good. He'd been the number 1 pick of the draft. He'd had some great years in Kansas City. They actually thought they had a chance to win the Super Bowl, and they were a playoff team with Patrick Mahomes sitting on the bench. So, in retrospect, and what we've seen with Jaden Daniels, I think Reid's right. It's possible that if Patrick Mahomes played as a rookie, he'd be just as good as he is now. Maybe he wouldn't be as good, and maybe Alex Smith should get all that credit, but Smith has deflected a lot of that too. He said he was a willing pupil. But, that's how that situation worked out. The way it worked out here was just as good, probably better, because Kansas City didn't get to the AFC Championship game that year, and this team did with Jaden Daniels. And does anybody want to say, gee, it would have been a really good idea if Daniels got to sit for a while and watch? No, I don't think so. He's going to win Rookie of the Year. By the way, all these lists that we're talking about, there's another one at the ESPN over the weekend. Super Bowl stories about Super Bowl rings. They had 58 of them. Most of them involve a player losing the ring, either getting it back or getting it back damaged or something like that. This was the best of the ring stories. They did, 58 ring stories, different players from each of the teams that won Super Bowls and what was a backstory about their ring. This is the best one. John Schmidt, who was the center on the Jets team that upset the Colts with Joe Namath in 1969, he calls it a miracle. And really, if you think about how long this was, he was surfing in Hawaii 40 years ago. So 40 years ago, 1985, right? So he'd already had the Super Bowl ring for 17 years, right? And he didn't have it. It was lost. He thought, that's the end of it. It's gone. I lost it while surfing in Hawaii. A lifeguard found it while snorkeling, then stashed it in his closet. He probably found it 40 years ago. And when he died, when the lifeguard died in 2011, His great niece discovered the hidden treasure while rummaging through his belongings. Once they identified it as a Super Bowl ring, they contacted the NFL, which directed them to the Jets. Schmidt would befriend the family that found the ring, and their bond remained strong. We've become a big family, says Schmidt, who has vacationed with the family in Hawaii. He lost the ring for 40 years, and then he got it back, and what he didn't know, and I guess the lifeguard, we didn't have social media, we didn't have ways of, although he probably could have called the Jets, but didn't, so he just stashed it in the closet. He dies in 2011, which would have been, 26 years after he lost the ring? And then, finally they find the ring, and now it's back reunited with. That's a cool story. All right, coming up, Fay Vincent died yesterday. Fay Vincent was 86 years old. He was the commissioner of baseball in a tumultuous short period of time, but one of the more interesting people I've encountered in sports, and I've got some personal recollections of him and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So I think Roger Goodell's been on the job for maybe 17, 18 years, something like that. Commissioners last a long time, generally. But Fay Vincent had only a 3-year run as commissioner of baseball, and partly because he was unwilling to bend to the people who were employing him. He was the commissioner of baseball, ascending to that spot in a very tragic way, 1989 till he was forced out in 1992. And you recall that Bart Giamatti became the commissioner in 1989, early in the year, I believe, after the owners had forced out Peter Ueberroth. Ueberroth had done a great job running the Olympics in 1984. That was thought to be a financial mess, and he made money as the chairman of the Olympics in 1984 in Los Angeles. So they looked at his business acumen and said, "Oh, that'll be good for us for baseball." They had forced out Bowie Kuhn, been there a long time. He did not handle the transition to free agency well. He was an old school guy, and they said the Bowie's got to go. They put in Ueberroth, and Ueberroth gets the owners together, and he says, "You guys are nuts. You're bidding against yourself on these free agents. Just agree not to spend money." Which they did, and you had players changing teams with no offers, like, Andre Dawson, one of the best players in baseball, wanted to go to the Cubs, couldn't get any money, said, "Just pay me what you want." They gave him $500,000. He was the MVP. And so anyway, the players started to look at this, and they got together, and they sued. And they said there was collusion, and a judge ruled in their favor. So the owners got a big, fat, smack in the face money-wise that they were going to have to pay out all this money in collusion damages. So they bring in the president of Yale, Bart Giamatti, who had a friend named Fay Vincent. And Fay Vincent was an attorney, and Vincent negotiated the contract that Giamatti signed as president of as commissioner of baseball, and Fay Vincent would be the deputy commissioner. So along comes, the summer of 1989, and they catch Pete Rose with all these betting things, and actually a lot of the background had been done by Fay Vincent because he was an attorney. John Dowd was also involved in the investigation. And in August of 1989, Bart Giamatti announces that Pete Rose has stained the game, and he is banished. And you know all about that, how that went on. And then 8 days later, Bart Giamatti died of a heart attack. So Fay Vincent was elevated to the job, and he had to deal with the lifetime ban for Pete Rose. It wasn't much after that. It was just a few weeks later that we had the World Series in San Francisco, and we had the earthquake, and they had to shut down the World Series for a week. He got a lot of pushback on that. The owners were not happy with him because he had volunteered for each of them to contribute $50,000 to earthquake relief funds. Even his friend, George W. Bush, who then owned the Texas Rangers, told Vincent that he should have called before he offered money on the owner's behalf. They didn't like that. They wanted to call the shots. They didn't want Fay calling the shots. Then comes the spring of 1990, and there's a lockout. And the owners are hardline. They're gonna make sure that the players have a salary cap. And I remember this very well because I was covering this on a day-in, day-out basis for Sports News Network. I was living in New York at the time, and there was sort of an unknown commissioner then. Owner, the owner of the Milwaukee Brewers, Bud Selig. and Bud Selig had a small market team, and he was leading a hardline charge to make the players come to their knees, which they'd never done before. And they had a really good negotiator, Gene Orza, who was kind of a wise guy there, and they were not going to cave. And so it finally came down to the point where, you're going to have to start knocking out big parts of the season. And they wanted Fay Vincent to stand behind them and say, yes, we're going to bring the union to their knees. And Fay was more conciliatory. He was involved in the talks, and they caved. The owners caved. We had a season in 1990, but they said, there's not going to be any more of this. So I think this happened, if I'm not mistaken, in September of 1992, just as that season was coming to an end, the owners voted that Fay Vincent had to go and Bud Selig would become the new commissioner. Several months later, Fay Vincent appeared on a show with Bob Costas, and they talked about his ouster from baseball after those tumultuous years, which, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, also included the banishment of George Steinbrenner for a couple of years because Steinbrenner was paying a low-level guy named Howie Spira to dig up dirt on Dave Winfield. So he was doing really dastardly things behind the scenes, and they had to kick out Steinbrenner for 2 years. So all those things happened in a 3-year period. He's out. A couple months later, he talks to Bob Costas about what all went down.
This criticism of Fay Vincent. He made a lot of right decisions and had a lot of correct notions, but he got too autocratic. He got too arrogant and high-handed, and not only did this irritate some of the owners, but it put fear in them because they said, look, he might have been high-handed with George Steinbrenner, but we think George pretty much deserved it. But what if I'm next? Or, yeah, we think the Cubs should go to the West with the Cardinals, but if the National League bylaws say that the Cubs alone can veto that, and Fay says no, in the best interest of baseball, I overrule it, what happens if it's my ox being gored next? And it was that approach, rather than the wisdom of your decisions, most of which people seem to agree with, there was that approach that scared them off.
Well, I think that's probably correct. Not that I agree that I was high-handed or arrogant, but I think that making tough decisions does cause reaction. I think the sad phenomenon, and it's a phenomenon of American life, is that the result is to go to court. And I think if I were to predict what will happen in baseball and in all sports generally, anybody whose ox is gored, your phrase, will go to court. The Cubs went to court. There will be more litigation on any major decision in baseball. If Major League Baseball tries to reopen and some of the owners don't like it, some of them have told me, we're going to court. Well, that you have to reach the bottom. That phenomenon will have to go all the way down to the point where people recognize that's not the answer. The judges are not going to be good at making decisions about baseball.
In retrospect, could you have done things differently in terms of approach that would have allowed you to accomplish the substantive things you wanted to accomplish, but wouldn't have cost you your job?
Well, if I weren't me. I mean, there are ways to do that job that I couldn't do, and I suppose if I were a different person, had different approaches, different attitudes, maybe. But I don't have any apologies. I made mistakes, and yet I think I did a number of things very correctly. I think on most of the major issues, I was correct. And I think a lot of the initiatives that I started will turn out to be important for baseball. International baseball, when I got there was none. Now there's a substantial business. So I think that I did the best I could. I couldn't change what I was. I was not going to be an appeaser or a conciliator, and I wasn't going to duck issues. The big problem in baseball is if you run the job of commissioner looking to be reelected or to make people happy, you basically have to finesse most major decisions. And why would I do that? That wasn't what I thought I was supposed to do, and I didn't.
Have you had owners call you and say, Fay, it didn't have to turn out this way? You were right about the realignment. You were right about the expansion. You pushed for more minority hirings. You were right about Steve Howe. So you made these mistakes, but they weren't enough to do you in, but your approach did you in.
No, I think the biggest problem I had was the perception that that I was soft on labor, and they wanted to have a major confrontation and worried that I would interfere. That was the principle.
Well, last June,
and the great iron, yes.
Last June, they wanted you to openly agree that you would not be involved in labor relations, and you refused.
That's right. And I think that was the principal problem. I think most of these owners are desperate. As I told you earlier, when you're losing money and you're in bad economic straits, you don't do sound thinking, and you do things that are not smart. And that's what happened, and that is happening in baseball. And I understand that. And I think bad economics cause bad things to happen throughout this country. And when a businessman is losing money in his principal business and is feeling desperate, he gets very concerned. And he thinks we have to crush this union, and this is our last chance, and this is our one opportunity to destroy this bête noire that is causing all of baseball's problems. Well, it's childish. It's not going to happen.
That's Fay Vincent 32 years ago after being ousted as commissioner with Bob Costas, and why it happened. And look, the owners were going to go hard line. And with Bud Selig as the commissioner, they did. They had another lockout in 1994, which was their position that they were going to go ahead with scab players, and eventually Judge Sonia Sotomayor, who's now on the Supreme Court, ruled in favor of the players, and they got back on the field. Now, the sport is a lot healthier economically since those days of 92. The explosion of the regional sports cable networks had a lot to do with that, and it's a healthy financial sport right now. But when Fay Vincent was pushed out the door, there were owners who did not like his soft approach. They wanted to go hard line. They thought Bud was their guy. And here we are all these years later. Bud is now retired, and you can say what you want about Rob Manfred. But the one thing I would mention about Fay Vincent that was really cool, when I was covering the lockout for Sports News Network, there were cell phones. I didn't have one, but they were in the early stages. They looked like toasters, they were big ones like you see in the movie Wall Street. But he was accessible. He had a phone in his house, a landline, and he was listed in the phone book. Or directory. If you're too young to know what a phone book is, ask your dad, ask your grandfather. But we were able to call Fay Vincent at home and just talk to him. It was really a remarkable thing, and I really enjoyed covering that lockout. It was really a crazy period of time. I was a lot younger. I was hustling, sleeping in the office, things like that. But it was a great time for me personally, and not a great time for baseball. But eventually, the lockout was scheduled in time to have, I think, they may have cut a few games out of that season, but they were able to start spring training either late March or early April and get the season launched. But rest in peace, Fay Vincent, who passed away at the age of 86 over the weekend. We'll get back to the NFL. Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network on the Rich Eisen Show on the Coaching Go-Round and more as we get ready for Super Bowl 59. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Got Bram coming up at 11 o'clock. He and others, including me, had hopes that he would be in New Orleans this week for the Super Bowl as he does the games for the Commanders, but they're not in, and it's the Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles again, and that's really the only holdup now on the last of the coaching spots. It's believed that Kellen Moore, who's the offensive coordinator for Philadelphia, will take the Saints job once the Super Bowl ends. They are not, as I understand, interviewing any more candidates, and it's Moore's job unless there's a last-minute snag on a contract or something like that. But the likelihood is that Moore will fill the last spot. As you know, Cliff Kingsbury is staying in Washington. He did not interview for the job, and off we go. Now, it was assumed by a lot of people that Mike McCarthy, after the Cowboys decided not to bring him back, or he decided not to go back to them, was going to go to the Saints. He's got some ties there. Apparently that never materialized. Tom Pelissero covers the NFL for the NFL Network. This was his explanation of that with Rich Eisen on Friday.
Mike never interviewed for the job. I know that some people have misreported rumors about, the talks went badly and stuff. They never talked. And Mike's known Mickey for a quarter century since he was the offensive coordinator of the Saints back in 2000. They could have brought Mike in at any point and done an interview, but they kept kind of, I don't want to say stalling, because there was a snowstorm in there that changed the cadence and, and those sorts of things here, but they never set it up. They never booked a plane ticket for Mike McCarthy. And at some point you're sitting there and just going, this doesn't feel right. The last thing that McCarthy was going to do, because he did, he took a run at the Bears job. And from everything I was told, that interview went really well. They just always had Ben Johnson. That was their number one candidate. They ended up paying what it took to get him. With New Orleans, there was going to be more of a conversation in terms of Mike McCarthy and even being interested in that job. And listen, there's challenges in New Orleans, whether it's the salary cap, the fact that you're locked in with guaranteed money into Derek Carr, you've got an old, expensive roster. You're granted in a weak division, one that you would think, hey, this team is built to win now. When I say that, I'm not saying that they got the best roster in the league. What I'm saying is you don't have a roster that looks like this, is composed like this, if you're not thinking we're winning in 2025. So, for Kellen Moore, who's interviewed for several years now for head coaching jobs, it sounds like this is one that he is, obviously intrigued enough to continue to go down the road on it. With regards to Mike McCarthy, I mean, we've talked about this before. You put his resume up against Mike Tomlin or Sean Payton, they look almost identical in terms of wins, playoff appearances, all have won one Super Bowl. For whatever reason, Mike McCarthy doesn't command that same level of respect in the media or among the fans. But absolutely, when you look at a cycle like this one where Mike Vrabel came back and Pete Carroll came back, I would anticipate that Mike McCarthy is very much in that mode. And with 7-8 jobs opening every year, I do anticipate he'll have opportunities coming up in 2026.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. Tom, I don't know if you've heard the word chutzpah before, Tom. It's more from my side of the conversation than maybe yours. It means audacious or overly confident, self-confident, like, boy, somebody's got chutzpah. Did Liam Cohen really call the Bucs and ask for permission to speak to some other people to come with him? Did that really happen, Tom?
He has indeed, and probably not surprising that the Buccaneers said no. We're not going to let anybody come for a lateral move. The way that this is set up in the rules too,
yes,
is you can block. Technically, all position coaches are on the same level. The rules are a little bit different with quarterbacks coaches, but if you're an assistant offensive line coach or an offensive line coach, in terms of the anti-tampering policy and the hiring policies, those are considered on the same level. And so even when you request your assistant offensive line coach to come interview for your offensive line job, the Bucs can still say no. That's a guy who came with Liam Cohen to Tampa, and the Bucs are obviously just like, we're not going to help you in any regard here. With regards to the offensive line coach, Kevin Carberry, they did block him for a lateral move. There would certainly be a possibility somewhere along the line here that maybe they put in an offensive coordinator slip for Kevin Carberry. That would not be able to be blocked. But you already saw Cohen, he locked up very late last night. Anthony Campanile, who's a well-respected defensive assistant. He's getting his first coordinator job and headed to Jacksonville here. The OC search is ongoing, but Liam Cohen also has already said, he's going to be the play caller. He's going to be the primary voice on offense. You need a good OC even as a play-calling head coach because you need somebody to design the game plans. It's a lot of that work is the OC's job through the course of the week here. So an important hire for Liam Cohen and one that looks like it's going to take a little bit longer.
That's part one from Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network. And as these staffs are filling up, this was an interesting hire by Pete Carroll, who's now back as the head coach in the NFL with the Las Vegas Raiders. And he's hired Chip Kelly. Yeah, Chip Kelly, who made a bizarre move a year ago. I guess it paid off, especially if his goal was to get back in the NFL. But he was the head coach at UCLA 2 years ago, and he left to become the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Like, he just wanted to coach. He didn't want to have to deal with all the NIL stuff and all the recruiting. So he joins the staff at Ohio State. Obviously, it paid off for both of them as they won the national championship. So now Kelly is hired as the new offensive coordinator by Pete Carroll. He'll be the highest paid coordinator in the NFL, making $6 million a year. That used to be head coach money anyway. And it'll be his first coordinator job. He held the position as head coach 3 years with Philadelphia and 1 with the 49ers. The thing about his offense in the NFL, it wears itself out. I mean, it was a really hot thing in Philly for a while, and they made the playoffs, but then they fell apart. He lasted only 1 year with San Francisco. He's 61 years old. I don't know whether he's angling to become a head coach again. Hell, if Pete Carroll's 73, I guess at 61, he's the young assistant. But in his 4 years in the NFL, he was 28-35. And he had a top 5 offense in points and yards twice, 2013 and 2014. But I'm not sure, what this is about. And also, well, I guess Pete Carroll knows he's been in the NFL long enough, but I'm kind of surprised about this. And does he have a quarterback to do that? And does this mean that Russell Wilson, as strange as it sounds, because Carroll basically booted him out of Seattle, he got tired of him, sent him off to Denver, does this mean a reunion between the two of them? Because I don't think Russell Wilson's going to be re-signed by Pittsburgh. And he's available. He's a veteran. They worked together before. Might happen. And with Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator, that makes for a very, very interesting setup there. More Super Bowl yak. This came from the late night show. I think they call it late night or something like that. And it was Jason Kelce, and he's, boy, for a guy who's only been out of football for a year. Remember, he retired only a season ago. He is out there all the time. And this show that he did wasn't very good at it. I mean, these guys who host these late-night shows and get paid these enormous salaries, they earn it because they're good and they draw in ratings. I understand the ratings were terrible for this, and he was terrible doing it. It's just not something you can step right into after playing. And, he tried to do his image. He wore his high school Letterman's jacket and a pair of jeans and boots and, just sort of a T-shirt, wanted to look like every man. And so, in doing this on Saturday night, he has his brother, Jason, on by remote. Travis, excuse me. It's Jason hosting Travis on remote, the tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. And of all the stuff I've seen from the show, and I haven't watched a ton of it because I didn't think it was very good, but this I thought was a pretty good segment with brother talking to brother about the Super Bowl and what's upcoming.
You're in front of a Philadelphia crowd right now. Is there anything you'd like to say to the fans of Philadelphia?
Go Birds, baby.
You don't mean that.
No, you know what I mean? I'm a Jason Kelce fanatic, dude.
Yeah.
I love that guy, man. I still got all the gangrene from your guys' Super Bowls and your run in Philly, man. I still got some Philly pride, man. I'm wishing the best for those guys, but it's go Birds.
Yeah, there's absolutely no chance you mean that. No. Yeah. I know you guys are going for your three-peat, but every team is different. How is this year's Chiefs team different than the last two?
Man, that's a good question.
I know.
This team still feels hungry. It feels new almost. We got a lot of new players, got a lot of different faces from the previous two Super Bowl runs. And it's really a different identity on the offensive side for sure. The defensive side has been pretty stout and a lot of familiar faces over there, but I think it's just a new mindset on the offensive side. I think all of that being said, it's just it's a new journey, man.
Yeah. Well, it's just 2 years ago you faced the Eagles in Super Bowl 57. What have you seen that's different about this Eagles team this time around?
They really they beefed up front at position.
Yeah. Shout out to Cam Jurgens.
It was like it kind of went down from the tackles to the guards to the center.
Yeah, we get it.
The last time I saw them, but now it's like, man, straight across the board. They're pretty big and beefy, man.
Yeah, they look good. I'm glad you brought that up. All right, very important question. Are you calling the coin toss?
I can neither confirm nor deny this, Jason.
Yeah. Well, can you confirm or deny what you will or will not be called?
I think it's going to be heads or tails.
Okay, thank you. Oh, not. It won't land on its side.
No, I'm not going to. No. I don't think it'll. I mean, possibility. And it's turf, though. It's turf. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything could happen.
You never know how those coins land.
All right. We're going to go with a fun one here. If you could change bodies with any teammate, who would it be?
Switch bodies?
Freaky Friday. If you could Freaky Friday anyone on your team, who would it be?
This is hilarious, man. Body, too? You're going to make me go that route?
I want to know. I want to know you going big or small.
I'm going to go the opposite way you're wanting me to go. I'm going to say Creed Humphrey.
Creed Humphrey?
A guy just confident in his skin and doesn't give a damn.
This is bull. There's no way.
Just a big, strong man. I wish I had shoulders and arms like that. You kidding me?
Yeah, so you're saying you wish you were me, huh?
I'm jealous. I want to be able to eat what I want, Jason.
Listen, Trav, thanks for coming. We really appreciate it. Everyone here appreciates it. Best of luck, kind of. I'll see you next week, huh?
Love you, big guy. Keep killing it, man.
Yeah, it's an odd position, I guess, for Jason Kelce to be in. Philadelphia legend, probably be in the Hall of Fame, won a Super Bowl with them, gave that famous speech in the Mummers outfit when they won the Super Bowl championship, played against his brother. And now, you want to root against your brother, right? If you're Philadelphia, but you also have your brother who you kind of root for. So it leaves him in an interesting position. Creed Humphrey is the center, by the way, for Kansas City. And and I guess I understand what Jason Kelce is saying. As a tight end, he probably does have to watch what he eats. His weight is important. Whereas Jason, who's probably lost some weight since he played, could eat whatever he wanted. In fact, some of these guys who have lost a lot of weight since they started playing, or stopped playing, I should say, they find that it's a lot easier. Like losing weight wasn't that difficult because while they were playing, they were trying to keep weight on all the time. I know they were big and beefy and it didn't look, right. But the first guy I can remember doing that was Mark May. Mark May he's tall. I think May's like about 6'6", and he was a first-round draft pick by Washington when they hadn't taken many in years. Art Monk had gone in the first round the year before, in 1980, and in 1981, he was the Outland Trophy from Pitt, and he was supposed to be the stalwart at left tackle for years. Left tackle, very much valued, especially when you have a right-handed quarterback, and he was going to be the one that was going to protect Joe Theismann. And as it turned out, Joe Jacoby was a better left tackle. They moved him to left tackle, and May moved into guard, as a matter of fact. He was the guard, and then they had George Stark, who'd been around for a long time. He played right tackle, and then when Stark retired, May moved over to right tackle. But after May finished, and he played, 13, 14 years, finally retired from the Arizona Cardinals, like 93 or so, he lost over 100 pounds. He looked totally different. And he said, I feel better. It's easier on my joints. And he just liked it a lot more being a lighter weight. And he did television for a long time. I don't know what he's doing now. But I would think that this will probably be, especially if they lose, I would think if they lose, this will be the last game for Travis Kelce. If they win, the temptation to go for 4 in a row has got to be there, I would think. The fact that he's got 3 Super Bowl championships, he's probably going to go into the Hall of Fame with his brother. I think it's going to be a double. I guess there are other brother combinations in there. But, with the Mannings, one Manning in and Eli likely to get in, I think he's going to get in. Maybe not this time, but he'll get in. The Kelce brothers should both get in. But I thought that was a little fun conversation that they had on what is a show that I don't think is coming back. I'd be surprised if they bring back this. They did it only for the playoff run, so it wasn't like it was a season-long show. But for the last 4 or 5 Saturday nights, he had done that show on ESPN. All right, that is a wrap for me as we roll into day 2 of Super Bowl hype. Bram is coming up next, and I'll be back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.